Hello, and welcome to Strange Dominions, where we attempt to unlock the mysteries behind the unseen and unheard, unknown and unknowable. I am your host, Octavian Graves. Tonight, Ian and I have the pleasure of speaking with Kate. Kate has a plethora of very, very interesting stories, from a shadowy guardian to a UFO experience, many, many ghost stories, and the presence of a guardian angel. If you have seen something strange or unusual, such as a cryptid, spirit, UFO, or anything in between, please send us an email at strangedominionspodcast@gmail.com. If you are enjoying the content we are putting out and would like to get extra content, you can sign up on our Patreon. Our Patreon starts at just $4 a month, and you get access to extra content, bonus episodes, merchandise, and much, much more. We are having a Q&A session on our Patreon the last week of April. So, if you would like to ask a question, you can go on our Patreon, sign up, and ask as many questions as you would like. Without further ado, we bring you our interview with Kate. All right, tonight, Ian and I are speaking with Kate. Now, Kate, you have had some weird experiences throughout your life, but before I get into those, do you want to just tell listeners who you are?
Yeah, my name is Kate. I'm 36 years old. I reside in Pennsylvania right now.
Okay, great. Well, we're in Maryland, so we're not too far away.
Yeah, welcome to Strange Dominions. It's a pleasure to have you.
Hey, thank you.
Yeah, so wherever you want to start, please go right ahead.
My first major experience was about 3.5 years ago. I was in North Carolina, and me and my biological mother shared a trailer, and she was at work, and it was a really low point in my life where I tried very hard to go to church and reach out to like what everybody says is the Christian God, like as per guided by my family. It was the middle of the night, and I woke up, but not woke up per se as you would wake up physically. I saw in shades of like gray and black, and the closest thing I could describe it would be like a static TV, but it's nowhere near the same thing. And my eyes, like I was like physically asleep and paralyzed, but so you could call this like a classic case of like sleep paralysis, except that there was a being behind me, and like as a human, a male, and caressing my sides, but not in a sexual manner at all. Like it was very comforting. Like just comfort is like giving me hope. And when it finally finished, it kind of went to the window. Now, my window in this trailer was this humongous. It's a really, really big window, probably like 4 feet wide and 6 feet tall, 5 feet tall. So it was a big window. Took up most of the wall. And I feel this big being, I didn't see any details. Like I said, I saw in shades of like gray and black, but the being was all dark. So I made out like the outline of the being, and it had multiple wings, like at least four wings. It was ginormous. It was probably like 9 feet tall and probably like 5 feet wide. And I thought, and I'm assuming this is telepathy, I thought, when am I going to see you again? Because I did not want this being to go. And the thought that came back to me was when I'm dead. So, but none of this was negative to me. Immediately, like physically, mentally asleep. And the next day I knew it was not a normal dream. I wasn't partaking in cannabis then. I wasn't on drugs or medication. I didn't drink. And I actually looked up, and if you look up comforter, like DeviantArt, you find a lot of women artists drawing like a cloudy figure holding them or something of that sort, which is really neat. That was the first one. About a month later, I had the second one. And that one was the complete opposite, to be honest. It was about the same time at night. And about 3:30, maybe 3:30, 4 o'clock, something like that. I don't know an actual time, but I feel like it was the middle of the night. I usually wake up in the middle of the night anyway, around the same time since I was born. The same time I was born, around 3:30, I wake up. Like I said, I woke up not physically, but seeing in shades of gray and black again. At the foot of my bed, there was two really ominous figures. I don't know if I said that right, ominous. But the way I could describe how evil they felt, if you've ever seen Bleach, which is, though these were like, I guess you could call them shadow men. One's shorter, one's taller. Like, you've ever seen Bleach, the anime, and the Aizen is like the supreme evil being. And when he hits Japan on the ground, people from like all over, they faint, they fall, they can't stand the pressure. This is how they radiated evilness. Like I felt like I was some part of me that was precious was in like mortal danger. Like I could have lost everything. So when I was little, I taught myself, when I had all these nightmares I told you guys about, to start chanting, help me God, help me God, help me God, help me God. And I only managed to wake myself up that night that I tried when I was a kid. So immediately my mouth, and I was sleep paralyzed. My mouth unstuck and began saying, help me God, help me God, help me God, help me God. Now, the shorter of these figures, it laughed, and it was a really cruel laugh. And he said, she thinks God will help her. Emphasis on God. So I'm figuring that God is not whatever being is out there, was not their name. And they took a half a knee bend towards me and got sucked out of the door in like prism, like towards the top of the door. And there's things that set this apart from an actual dream. Like I could see my poodle that was at the foot of my bed and feel it and aware of it coming up as I'm chanting and like licking my face. Cause I know that there is something going on that I can't really understand, but I knew I was in danger. But the next day it was just, I knew it wasn't a dream. Again, I wasn't doing any mushrooms or anything weird like that. Just trying to make things work with me and my biological mom. I think it was about 2 years ago now that I actually had lap band, and that's how I lost some of my weight. And I didn't know a lot of the times, but I would feel like when I ate, I would eat and it would fill up my throat to my esophagus. Well, I was staying on the beach that winter and in Atlantic Beach, North Carolina, and I ate and that's how I fell asleep face down, and I choked and I vomited and I died. Like when I died, I know I died because I had an after-death experience. I know it sounds extremely cliche, like, you know, that person like in shape like a U that you can't physically be as when you're floating in the sky with all the clouds. That was me. But I wasn't seeing from my eyes. I was seeing from like my stomach or something. Like I was seeing upwards while my eyes like, and what I remember is like, you know how you look and you can see your nose and that's really annoying. Like when you look forward, like there was no nose there. So I wasn't in a physical body. The feeling I felt when I was floating in the clouds was what I describe as pure bliss. I had a lot of friends at the time on heroin, and they were always chasing that high no matter what they could get. And I thought this is what's going to cure my friends. Like if I could get this feeling and give it to them, they'd be perfect. And then I remember thinking as I'm floating there, this feeling, like this is something like that the state would get a hold of and like distribute evenly, like in welfare. And then I'm like, no, this is something like the government would hoard. They would never get rid of. The feeling I feel is what the human race is chasing after. It is what drugs are modeled after. This is, whether it's a rush of DMT, whether it was an actual thing, this is the feeling. Like we are 1% and that feeling is the other 99% of what we need to have. So there's this gigantic hand looming down. It's huge, like humongous hand. And I'm floating there and I feel the aura of like a female and a male in this one hand. So both female, male. And I remember thinking, I don't want my mom to grieve over another child. Even though my mom was terrible, she'd already lost my brother. He actually died at Area 51 with no body. So that's another story. His name was Michael A. Eisel. It's declassified. I think it's a bunch of shit. But it was my half brother. And then I felt like when I thought that, I felt like a twinge of like feminine annoyance. And then I felt like I hurtled down to earth, like boom. And then like I hit the bed. And I woke up in the morning and my migraine, vomiting and just terrible. Like I had a migraine that made me sick, beyond sick, for an entire month. I didn't go to the hospital, but I felt like crap. I tell you that much. It was bad. So, but that feeling changed, that whole thing changed what I am. I began developing like ability, like extreme intuition, like what I call like clairrecognizant, which is just something I'd never had before. Someone lies to me, if they have any intention at all, I can clearly see it. Even if it's over writing, you can tell someone's legitimate. It's stuff that people can't believe. You can't tell someone, hey, you're lying, because then they're going to be like, how the fuck do you know? Excuse me. But
don't worry about cussing. You're fine.
Yeah. So that began to change me. The final thing that happened, the final big thing, was just about 6 months after. And so all this is fairly recent. I was in Jacksonville, North Carolina, where my brother had previously served, and I was trying to find a place to live. The apartments are hard to find there, believe it or not. And I was off in like a trail because I was staying at a hotel, so I went down a trail on some land that was for sale, and it was muddy, it was pouring, it was like a really dreary, humid, wet day. And I was on this trail and there's this gigantic spider web and like an orb weaver, and it's there, and I'm just meditating and I'm partaking in cannabis at the time. And I'm just having a good time being in the solitude of the woods. And then I hear a voice, and it's not me thinking, but I'm not really doing too much to pay attention to it. And it's saying, get up and leave the trail, get going back home. And it's getting persistent, and I'm arguing, and it's coming from like the right side, right frontal lobe, perhaps, of my brain. And it's saying, get up and go, get up and go, get up and leave the trail. And I'm arguing with it now because I don't want to stop meditating and having my good old time by myself. I don't want to go back to the busy hotel. And then it cuts through like a knife, and it goes, didn't you say you didn't want your mother to grieve for another child? And I know I didn't think that. So I freaked out, and I'm like, okay, I'll get up and I'll go back. And I went up and got back off the trail to the road. Not even like 50 seconds later, a gigantic Jeep, it's like on lifts, the wheels are up, it's hydraulics, it's a Jeep filled with Marines and mountain bikes, is barreling past me onto the trail, and they're going to go mudding, and that would have squashed me like a pancake. I would have been dead beyond dead. Like, this voice saved my life. So it's crazy how that stuff happens.
My God, like, I'm just hanging on your entire story right now. I've got chills going up and down my spine. That is intense. Just the way you described that voice, just like you articulate, like, your mother's going to grieve another child. I'm like, that hit me. It's going to chill down my spine. My goodness.
It clarified at that moment. Like, it was getting to the point where the Jeep was getting close. And my only thought after that was, well, that poor spider is going to die. It hadn't hit me yet that my life was saved because of that. So...
That's really deep. That's really powerful. And I think there's a lot to that. There's a lot of different phenomena that kind of relates to. And I definitely want to get into that with you. Do you want to talk about your brother first before we start kind of dissecting all this stuff?
Yeah, I want to hear about that.
Yeah.
You dropped that little note, and we can't let that fly. You got to tell us about your brother.
Thanks. So I had a half brother named Michael, and I think genetically we were a lot more alike. My biological mother, always said you guys were so much more alike than him and his actual sister. And when I was 16, so he did some service in Lejeune in the Marines and missed both chances to go overseas, and got an opportunity to take an Air Force civilian contract to Area 51, Nellis Air Force Base, and working for a company there, which I forget the company name, but it's all just declassified online. Michael A. Izold, Izold, is I was in high school, and we got a phone call. We came home one night, my half-sister, my mother, and her daughter came home, and there was a phone call, and my mom answered and then hit her knees. And then my sister took the phone and was like, who is this? And it was Michael's wife calling to say that he died. Well, there was a mega lawsuit at that point. So us as a family, we were not given closure for 2 years. We didn't know what happened. They flew our entire family, so me, half-blood, my sister's daughter, my mother, to stay at the Excalibur, which was his favorite hotel, paid for by the company for like a week. And this suite was like $1,600 a night per person. So this was a lot of money this company spent flying us and extended family out to do this. The funeral, casket, no body in it. So as a family, we were not allowed to know for 2 years what happened. His wife, we were on speaking terms, which she's nice to me, but some of the family does not speak to her. Regardless, she cut us off and didn't speak to us at all. So we didn't know what happened. We couldn't ask her any details. We couldn't get a hold of her. We didn't know what happened. The military wouldn't tell us what happened. My mother would call every day. We were not allowed to know until it was officially declassified 2 years later. Supposedly there was a big multi-class action lawsuit. And there was, the story was that they say basically that there was the pilot without a co-pilot, and he was going to a chiropractor for heart issues, a private chiropractor, so they weren't able to trace it supposedly. And he was on inappropriate drugs as well as diet pills and had a heart attack mid-flight, and the entire plane went down. And that Michael died without a body. His body burnt up because he was sitting over the gas tank. Well, this was a Beechcraft KA or a Beechcraft 1900 K. I have done as much research as I could. And the fuel tank is at the farthest point of one wing or both wings, depending which plane it is. So that really doesn't make a lot of physical sense. I've talked about that with some veterans, and they're like, nah, that don't make sense. But apparently that there was a multi-million-dollar lawsuit, and these 12 widows, including my brother's wife, won millions of dollars. And my sister sister contacted a friend from high school who said she won enough she could have set us all up with like big $600,000 houses and cars and everything. But instead she cut us off right then and there after he died. So for 2 years, family didn't know what happened, no closure, no body, no info. So it's definitely something that I know for a fact, if Michael had a chance to go on to something bigger and better. At the time, his wife was using his Social Security number for credit cards when the stuff was being sent to her work. He was not stupid. At that point, you can't. I graduated high school in 2005. So when I was in a freshman year, you couldn't really get on the internet and go to Credit Karma and be like, what's going on with my credit? But he worked for the military, for Area 51. He wasn't stupid. If he got the chance to go on to something bigger and better, he would have. 2 weeks before he died, we got a phone call from my brother. He called occasionally. And I told him I loved him. And I had never done that because we weren't close. We didn't grow up together. He was a lot older. And he said, well, I love you too. And then I said, hey, so do aliens really exist? And so he paused and they said, even if they did, I couldn't tell you. And he died 2 weeks later, which is crazy shit. So you can type his name up and find 50,000 conspiracy theories about my brother. That's weird. So
that's crazy. And I mean, that lines up with so many different things.
Yeah, that is wild. And it's just like you've got your foot in totally, almost different sides of the paranormal coin. And I guess that's just on the surface. It's messed up about your brother too and everything. And
yeah, sorry for your loss, for one.
He's passed, and I've spoken to his wife. And the weird thing is, she tried to convince me that he was dead. And with the claircognizant, I sensed there was something there, but not enough to know exactly what it was. So it just like red flag. Why are you trying to convince me he's dead? But it don't feel right, is what it is.
Do you feel like his wife was in on something, that there was something deeper that she was involved in, that he got,
I have no idea, but I really don't have any idea. It felt like a guilt vacation. I felt like it was a vacation. To me, it seems like guilt money, but it's not usual. Well, to be honest, when you get on a plane at that type of level of security, they have a way of doing things. There's supposed to be a nurse at the front of the plane that takes everybody's temperature, the heart rate, etc. There should have been people there aware that, hey, there's only one pilot. Why is there not two today? There's supposed to be two. His heartbeat would have been erratic beyond cocaine and diet pills. Unless they were just lax in security and don't want to admit that everything was so lax that this is why they died, perhaps he died and they're to blame. So they're kind of, like pushing it under the rug and blaming it on the pilot. Or perhaps he went on to something bigger and better. Or perhaps he got into something he shouldn't have. My brother was a moral man. So if something was going on, he would have said something. He would have done something.
Can I ask what year this all took place in?
I was 16. I'm 36 now. So I think I was a freshman in high school. It was in the newspaper. Nobody really bothered to read about it and say anything to me, but...
I'm trying to think what year it was and think if there was any significant UFO sightings or anything in UFO lore that was significant that could correlate to any of that.
Certainly something we can look into.
I'm absolutely terrible at math. I'm 36 now. I graduated high school in 2005. This was my freshman year, so it would have been 2001, I think.
Oh, okay.
2002.
Wow, okay. That's a very...
I think it was before the Twin... It was around like the time of the Twin Towers, before, after-ish, not an immediate time, but year within a year or so.
There was a lot going on around that time.
I can say that we're the same age, and I was in high school at that time.
Mm-hmm.
I was in 10th grade when the Twin Towers happened. So
I was in 9th grade when that happened.
Okay. So because I'm 36, but we're in the same idea. So it would have been,
that
sounds about right.
Yeah. Sorry, I was supposed to have company, except he just has been taking forever. But so good right now. So sorry.
Good. And we can edit things out. So
yeah, no problem.
No, it's like when you said that, I actually had like noises from upstairs. Like,
oh yeah. Then there's also people beeping outside. It's apartment town life issue. It's not the thing.
So can I ask you a couple questions about the more modern period of your life? Do you consistently still have, I guess you could say, mystical experiences or psychic experiences?
Yeah.
Could any that come to mind you want to share that happened more recently?
I had a vision of a long black-haired, grunge type being in like a white petticoat running up one of the hills in town. And I was in my attic. I've been here since August, so I think it was probably around August. I was in the attic getting a shelf. that I wasn't supposed to be in there getting. And I had some long black hairs on me that were stuck on the shelf. And that night I got up in the middle of the night and I went to come out here to the living room to turn the TV off. And when I hit the kitchen, which is in between here, the living room, the kitchen, and my bedroom, the hallway in the bedroom, I saw a vision, boom, of this long black hair woman facing the TV, but the TV was all static. So she was watching a static TV, and I was like, oh, fuck no. I knew if I went into the living room that something would have happened. So I turned around, went back to bed, and nothing happened, which is really weird. I live directly in front of the graveyard in town. It's where the person the town was named after is buried. I live in Titusville, PA, so it's the place where oil was born, the birthplace of oil. So the tycoon that invented drilling for oil is buried right behind my house. And behind my house, there's a grave up there, and she's called the witch of Titusville. And there's an emblem on her grave that looks very spooky. Now, there'd been a couple pieces by the librarian, Jessica, stating that no, she's not a witch. The piece is supposed to be a rose. And there's a little bit of information on her. She died early in childbirth. But when I had an app, an EVP app, I have, I think most of them are set up algorithm-wise, but I have what's called the Ultimate Ghost Detector. I think it's decent, and that's an app. I think I went up there to the graveyard trying to commune, and I had sat next to her grave and lit some sage. And immediately, the EVP starts going off. It says, torturer, 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 calling me a torturer. So I put it out, and it stopped, which is kind of weird. And then
that is kind of weird.
Interesting, though.
The grave kept saying, Jessica, Jessica, are you Jessica, Jessica? And then I'd say, no, I'm not Jessica. And it would say, go away. Well, Jessica's the person the librarian that posted the thing that she's not a witch, et cetera, et cetera. But I think Jessica pretty much, she gives me witchy vibes. So I don't know about that. So, I mean, after that, when I was doing that EVP, I always try to convey my feelings to the spirit that I feel connected to, the one that came to me that night, the comforter that turned into the big, and I always try to envision it and then commune to it. And I was telling it the night with those EVPs how I wanted to find out about the spirit realm. I wanted to connect. And that night, at 3:30, I woke with a start, uncomfortable, that there was a spirit looking at me or something. I was like, it was definitely weird. Somebody threw water on you, cold water. But those are all just feelings that people can explain away. But to me, I know different. So. Well,
the one question I have for you is that in your entire life, while these things have been going on, have you ever had an interest in magic and the occult? Have you ever practiced at any time or anything like that?
I have this on my hand, which is a pentagram, but it's upside down. I have my maternal genetic line traces down to Sir Hugh, who's a Templar Knight from the Scottish clan. And so I do have certain things happen, electronics will fail, street lights will turn on and off. I did weird things like that don't happen to anybody else that I know of. One occasion, a girl and myself, that we were neighbors, she had some not severe, but she had some intellectual disabilities. This was also in North Carolina in a different trailer. Nope. Yep. Same trailer. We walked in the room and my phone charger leapt off the desk and went halfway in the middle of the room, hovered for about 6 seconds and dropped. And we stood there, not even moving an inch, not looking at each other, not talking for probably about 12 seconds. And then we both just simultaneously turned around and walked out. We did not want to go in that room.
I can imagine why.
Things like that, I can't control when they happen. So I think it's more psychic for me, and rather than witchy. But if it is witchy, I don't know how to do anything, how to control anything. I've been on posts and they've said, oh, well, you've got to start getting into it now or you'll blow up. Well, I haven't blown up.
That's a very interesting thing to say.
Blow up, but more it'll internally
Oh, okay. All right. I understand now.
I delve more into the spiritual side of everything. Growing up, it was always Jesus, God, Jesus, God. And even now, my parents are very religious here. I'm in Pennsylvania with my dad's side and his wife, my stepmom, and it's very churchy town. And not knowing what I am is also, or what everything is, having no answers is extremely frustrating, but keeps pushing me. Because the more I experience, I know where I'm going to go when I die now. So I don't think I'm afraid of death whatsoever, but I'm more afraid of pain than death. But I would love to experience more, use an Oculus, because I know that I'm a magnet for some. If I could gain some control. And part of me being on Reddit and doing the research is to try to find answers. And I know there's answers out there that some people have gathered that I don't have also. So,
well, the reason why I ask is you mentioned that you called out to your comforter to get more in touch with the spirit realm. I
try to. So a lot of nights, like I try to envision what I saw that night, like shadow wise, and kind of just like talk out loud before I fall asleep.
And so I'm sure there are people who would disagree with me on this, but in my opinion, that is a magical act. That is calling out to the other and wanting to go into that world. Whereas other people, when they experience the things you've experienced, they would run the other way every single time they experienced it. And in my opinion, the more you want to get closer, the more on the magic side of things you are. And even as a Christian, don't get it twisted. Christianity is magic.
Not atheist. I just consider myself spiritual.
Yeah, and that's absolutely in the same realm, and that is part of it. So I think that magic is, for someone like you who've had these experiences and sort of have these kind of innate abilities that you just don't know how to control, it'd be very useful for you to dig into that and see how that can apply to you and how to kind of control what goes on with you.
I do feel very attracted to that. Like if I went into Spencer's with some people, immediately drawn to like the books, like the Wiccan books and such, like the plants and about Wiccan plants. It was very, it's like I love books. And I've recently gotten my hand on like the Nag scriptures and like a lot of books on Templars and aliens I got at Goodwill. Somebody had donated all these amazing books. So I'm going through them currently. As far as I've considered, am I actually a witch and doing things without knowing what I'm doing, how I'm doing? If what you're saying is your truth and the truth, then it's possible. Obviously, yeah, I'm probably doing things without knowing, which could also be a dangerous situation. So I've done the research and heard things, but never talked to someone face to face, like as convincing as this. So I feel like it's shameful to admit because I think I was warned about it once, but the guy was a douche. But he was like a Nord pagan, and I feel like I manifested a spirit at some point that will take vengeance on people that ultimately wronged me. Like, and although that's weird, there has been...
You're talking to... It's not weird. Trust me. It's not weird. What you're saying falls in line with 1,000 years of tradition. So, no, it's not weird. But go on, sorry.
I feel like that I did manifest and I have some control over a being that if someone is going out of their way to spite me, like in a ruthless way, like it will enact vengeance if it gets angry on my behalf or if I ask it to. It definitely, I was in a hotel once in North Carolina and I had... Sometimes, like when I was, I don't know if you would call it, make my own spell or something, like just like I call it meditating, but with a visional force of direction. I told this spirit to get rid of anything that would come in the way of me and my peace. And I don't know, one of the maids got fired like that evening for smoking in her hotel room, which is, I don't know how to...
What you're describing, and Ian will back me up on this, in different traditions you'd call it different things. If you told that to a chaos magician, they would tell you that you generated a servitor. If you contacted...
That's the name of...
Well, that's why I'm... So in each tradition, it's different. So in chaos magic, it'd be in servitor or egregore. In ritual magic or ceremonial magic, you would have a familiar. In more of the folk magic traditions and the African traditions, you would have an ancestor spirit that is following you and aiding you in your life. So all of those things are the same concept, which is a spirit that is under your command and willingly helping you in many areas of your life.
So they may be different things and have different sources. The mechanism is essentially the same. And as we said, it sounds like you have something inborn in you that's been perhaps self-training on a deeper level your entire life. And it seems that the first story you told us about something that was guarding and guiding you and protecting you and your comforter. And
so a lot of this all aligns into what I felt. And I'm wondering if when I had migraines as a child and that same nightmare every single night to where I had CAT scans and that developed, was that like being in my dream responsible for the gift I was given?
It's absolutely possible. 100%.
I feel like that being was actually like benevolent, but had decided perhaps she could be useful for some odd reason. Like, I don't feel like that was a good being at all, but decided to spare me, which why? Who knows? And that, I don't know nothing. So I love learning. So this means a lot to me with what you guys are doing.
Well, I'm
for
glad that we could be of service. One thing that I've learned from doing this show, we've been doing this show now for a year and some months. The people who have had what I would call positive shadow people experience, positive sleep paralysis experiences, or just anything that isn't entirely negative, tend to be magicians, witches, magic practitioners, occultists. So they always end up in that realm through those experiences. And I do feel that those two things are linked. So what you're saying is in line with the research that we have been doing with this show for a year. And the point of this show really is to see how magic and the occult and the paranormal link up and correlate, and what one can do if you can use magic to deal with the paranormal or communicate with the paranormal in a more meaningful way. And it definitely seems like you've fallen in line with that, even if you didn't realize it.
It falls in line with how I feel. And I feel like having the Templar in my bloodline and all the mass, like, slaughter they did of people as well. As far as meditating, I meditated once, and whether or not it was an actual vision or just me, like, being loopy, I felt like there was a vision of in front of me, like, of the Templars on the horses rushing, and then a small group of people, and one doing some type of, like, spell up to the sun before they all died. But it could have been, that was a vision I had in North Carolina as well. But I don't think that was as clear as, like, when I have visions. That wasn't as clear. So whether or not that was legit, I don't know.
Just out of curiosity, the experiences that you had in North Carolina, were they all around the same place in North Carolina, or were they all in different places?
Different places. The two with the spirits, the evil and the comforter, were in the same trailer in North Carolina, in 2 different bedrooms. And the other one was in Jacksonville, North Carolina. And the other one where I died was in Atlantic Beach, North Carolina.
Okay. All right. The reason I ask, have you ever heard of something called the Uwharries National Forest?
Mm-mm.
Okay, I think it's North Carolina.
Is that Outer Banks?
Maybe. I'm not sure. Ian, do you know?
Not off the top of my head.
Okay. It's somewhere in North Carolina. It's a very large forest, and a lot of very strange things go on there. There was a story from another podcast, Strange Familiars, of a guy who's had many, many extremely mystical experiences in that forest, and it is, I believe, in North Carolina. So,
is that the one that I like a lot?
Yes, it is.
I feel like in the middle of the woods is where I feel most connected to everything.
Well,
I don't like being around tons of people. I don't like parties. I like to be alone in the woods. I like it.
Yeah, so that's pretty, I mean, everything you're saying would point to you being of some kind of a very magical disposition. I'm not one to say that there are some people who can do magic and some people who can't. I believe everyone can do magic, but I do believe that there are people who it comes easier to, and they have gifts that make it just a little bit, they put them a little bit ahead, if that makes sense.
And I'll offer that
it's
too.
also helpful because it'll give me some direction, and if I can put the stuff into a legit direction and see some results, then that's also something I can add to the story. So
very much so.
We can offer you this on our Strange Dominions podcast Patreon and on our website. We are actually, today will be the first post of it. We are going to be posting all sorts of writings and guides, and a lot of that, I hope, can be things that can help people and people like you. And I wanted to comment about how you have an inborn talent. Many people do. I think some don't necessarily. Some people close it off, and that's all right for them. But I know the act of communicating, the act of willfully pushing yourself forward as if to quest or journey, or just that curiosity, because I know curiosity is what got me into my whole work as well. That act will empower you. It'll make that whatever you have, it will make it expand out in every direction.
I feel like I've been doubled down, tripled down on what I want to find out. Like, the more I experience, the more I want to know. Like, I really, really, really want to connect. So,
I mean, I'd say of all the magicians and mages and witches that I've met, that particular quality is the singular most foundational one that would make a successful and good mage of some sort, or witch. Like, that just, I think the more you ask of the universe, the more it will give you, and everything makes you grow. Nothing makes you take a step back, even if sometimes those encounters are uncomfortable.
There are a lot of resources out there for somebody like you, and we can point you to a couple, and obviously you can find some on your own, but there are plenty of places that you can go to sort of learn more about this and hone your skills, if we can say that, and really go somewhere with this, because you definitely have a gift.
Part of the reason that I haven't chased after it was simply because of the upbringing, because of the religious part of my family. And
that's totally understandable.
I would bring shame, really. But I think at this point, I am actually more important. And if I do pay attention to it, it would bring more positive things rather than ignoring it, which would probably not bring that many positive things.
And if you want to stay within that Christian paradigm in which you grew up, there is a ton of occultism.
I would rather stay where the knowledge and the truth is, where I can obtain the most, I suppose.
Okay, well, that's totally fair.
Never want to stop learning, basically.
Right.
Then I'd say you're doing everything right. I don't know. I think just you kind of walk into a bookstore or you get a feeling about a certain person, and you say hi, or you pick up the book and you read it. And perhaps what you learn and take away might not even be the whole point of the book or the conversation. But when it comes to magic, these things can be catalysts. And then you look back a year later and you're like, if I hadn't picked up that book, I would not be where I am now. And I would not have learned what I did. And like, you'd be a whole triple of a person than you are today. Sometimes I guess it sounds cheesy, but have faith in yourself. And
Octavian, I'm sorry I interrupted you so much. You hit on every key I wanted to talk about too. Sorry, and I wanted to apologize. I just interrupted both of you, but sorry if I felt like a need to burst in and like explain, because every key you hit on, I was like, oh yeah.
No problem. Don't worry about it. Yeah,
we want to hear about you. In fact,
you got the mic.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you mind if I toss a few questions your way about maybe some experiences you've had?
Yeah.
Because I always like it when people who kind of come from have you ever seen a UFO? Or, let me phrase it differently, any sort of weird light, not even in the sky, maybe in the forest, in the yard?
So I lived in North Carolina, and this was less than like 2 years ago. This was not last Easter, but the Easter before. Actually, I think this is like around the night that I found out my friend Kenny died. Like he was from this town, and I dated him. And I moved here, and we went our separate ways. And he actually died on like not last Easter, but the Easter before. And that night, I left the bar that was near the trailer I was renting, and it was this is in Newport, North Carolina, Broad Creek area. I left the bar. I forget what the bar was called, but we lived around Cherry Point Base. So Cherry Point Base wasn't very big, and it was actually not for air stuff. So it was more for like firefighting parts of the Marines. So the plane I saw was that typical V with like the three lights. And it was clear as day. It was really close. It was being pulled by like a line, like a fishing line, which was rather clear. I would describe it as a fishing line in the sky, and like a smaller plane. So it was a legit aircraft. It wasn't a UFO. That's a legit aircraft. I even posted the day after on Facebook, like with an image from like the 1950s paper, the exact image of the V with the three lights. Like, that plane exists. I saw it being towed across the sky, clear as day. Had I not known that no one had the photo, I would have whipped out my phone and been like, click, click, click. You wouldn't have seen much. But like, I thought that was something people knew existed at the point. Maybe I was tipsy. I was being stupid. But I legit saw it clear as day. So big, enormous, close.
No, that's fair. And I know a lot of UFO sightings are definitely established.
People military craft over there in that area of North Carolina. There is a military base there. It seems like there's a lot of sightings around all military bases, but I don't know. I think those sightings. Oh, actually, this town has a history in the paper in 1967 in the Titusville Herald.
Favorite year of UFO history right there.
The editor-in-chief wrote a piece. And when he wrote it, he described a time blip without calling it a time blip of the same hill that I think I had a vision of that girl running up. And that was here in town. And he described a time blip. If you look that up, it's somewhere on the internet. I can probably...
Can you find that and send it to me? Because I want to do a show on it.
Yeah.
Because I've been wanting to do some shows, or we want to do some shows on the 1960s era of what they called the UFO flaps at that time, because it was just tons and tons and tons of wild stories and experiences. And 67 was probably the most noteworthy year of the entire 60s.
And that was written by the editor-in-chief. So I think, and the fact that he didn't come out and call it a time blip so the small town wouldn't think he was crazy, that he just described it in a way that someone who's read about it and watched documentaries, realized that he was describing a time blip without calling it attention to it like that. I'll send that to you later, of course.
Awesome.
Oh, no, please do, because if we do a show on that, we'll send you a message so you can tune in, because if we do it and we include several cases that we go over and we can choose that one, we want to give you a shout out. So maybe you can, whatever we discover, we can share with you as well.
Now, I have a question. You said you were in Titusville, correct?
Yes.
And that is, I was looking on Google Maps, you are right in Allegheny National Forest.
Yep. I'm very familiar with the forest.
We were just talking about that the other day, right, Octavian?
Yes, we were. And I'm curious if you've had any experiences in or around the forest or anything like that.
I grew up in the forest. I grew up where they used to have the rainbow gatherings, like in Heart's Content.
Okay, yeah.
But I never had anything beyond like forest experiences that I can remember. Although I want to make it a point to do. I'm recently back in the area, so I left the area about when I was 20. I came back a couple of years ago and only stayed like a half a year. And so now I've been here a year and a half, so I haven't really had my feet down enough to experience a lot of the woods. We have Drake Well here, which is a national park, like state land, which I want to make it a point. I like to forage, and if I do experience more stuff, I will definitely stay. But I've not really had the chance to experience anything as a kid, not much really either. So just that's where I grew up. That's where I was born in Erie, but grew up way out in the woods.
So it's kind of funny. The last guest we interviewed for our last show was a paranormal investigator in the upstate New York, Lake Erie area. So we had a small discussion on that. So it's interesting, the timing and coincidence of that too. But did you have any other stories you'd like to tell us while we're here?
I personally think there is a lot of connection to what you are putting together, the paranormal and the spiritual realm, the aliens and the spiritual part of the world. I think there's not a black and white. I can feel when the veil, like what they call the veil, like when it's thin, it's almost like a hazy line. Around the time that I died, I began to gain that ability to sense when like the veil to the other side was thinner. So a lot of it's creepy, a lot of it's unnerving, but the only thing, I think if someone were like, hey, there's a demon in that building, or like a ghost there, I'd probably run in that direction, where most people would run the other way.
We would be right there with you, so that definitely tracks.
Yep.
I think there's no explanation, no clear definition that we as human beings have on what I experience or what I believe the truth is. I don't think there's a concrete night and day. There may seem to be to some people, but I don't think any of it's got a concrete, like black and white textbook. I think it's something where lines can be pushed, boundaries can be stretched beyond what we can imagine, what we can think of. But I know that I'm on the right track, 'cause when I died and had that experience, I know as long as I stay this way and keep doing things this way, that I have nothing to worry about.
And I would definitely agree with you. Yeah, very much so.
I almost feel like someone mentioned that Earth is like Shion, which is like the graveyard.
Sheol.
Yeah, so I feel like that is a heavy truth, because when I died, I felt like you could call that, like in the Abrahamic religions, you could call that the crown of life, because I feel like that's another 99.9% of what we are. So right now we're running at a 0.5% of who we should be. So
very well said.
I'm worried though, was that reincarnation? Would that hand have pulled me out of the womb of somebody else? I'm speaking to somebody on Instagram now, and they have dreams of them as their mother, like, and they think it's experiences that she had, and they're having nightmares. But I think he's having nightmares of past lives, like, and I don't think he realizes that. I haven't even brought it up with him or even looked twice at that to him, but I recognize that, and I am worried. If reincarnation exists, what does that mean for me? Was I terrible in my past life? Like, am I going to have a good next life? Like, I don't want to be a vase that, I don't know. That's a scary thought, because could that hand, I thought a few years later, could that hand have been a hand of a doctor coming to get me in? And I thought that's eerily probable, and that scares me.
I can definitely understand that. I tend to look at life to much more objectively, with very little in the good or bad categories. Things just kind of are, but I completely identify with what you're saying. And yeah, it is a scary thought. It really is.
Yep. And I mean, it's the great mystery, capital M.
And honestly, it would take the fun out of it if we totally knew all the answers. And maybe that is the point of some of it. And well, you know that you went somewhere. So you can always have confidence that one day these answers will be known to you.
A couple times in dreams successfully. Recently, most recent was like a couple nights ago. At the end of my dreams, before I woke up, I actually astral projected into my neighbor's downstairs apartment for some weird reason. So I went through like my laundry room and I'm looking around to where her bedroom was. So now I know it's in the back, which is weird. It's really weird. Like I had no intention to do that, no reason. So, but that's exactly what it was, astral projecting.
One thing that you might want to look into is dream magic and dream incubation, which is a very ancient form of spirit contact that was used by the Greeks, the Egyptians, the Babylonians. That entire region is well known for working with that paradigm, and I think it'd be very, very useful for you.
Mm-hmm. You know, the Egyptians, in a lot of ways, in their religion, had very similar to views to what you mentioned about the idea that Earth is Sheol, and the idea they had their Book of the Dead. But in a lot of ways, they looked at it that life was what we would consider the afterlife or the spirit realm. That is real life. And it is here what we consider the living world is more or less the land of the actual dead. So, and they had that kind of flip-flop idea that your real life is before and after. Here is just like, this is Sheol.
The Sumerians I find interesting too. At a very desperate point in my life, I scribbled onto a door a protection spell, so if you would be it, but with my intentions, that's how I could describe it. I didn't actually do the spell, or I didn't read it from a book. It was more or less intention and what came to me, and I wrote Enoch. I don't know how I spelled it. I don't think I spelled it Enoch. I think I spelled it differently, like Enok. But a lot of the way that I would write stuff, which I know I was suggested I should probably do.
Automatic writing?
When you start writing and it would come to you and
automatic writing.
Someone suggested I should do that because the stuff that came out like was a lot like Sumerian script. Like, and at one point I remember in a trailer in North Carolina, now that I'm talking about it, there was actually like what looked like a symbol like etched into my skin, just appeared kind of like a burn kind of and stayed. I took a picture of it and I posted on Facebook. This was, first time I remembered this since it happened, but nobody was able, the closest I got was like Sumerian. So
it's interesting about that.
A lot like Babylonian. Yeah.
Yeah. The Mesopotamian cultures, there's a lot of links to that in both magic, UFO lore, it stretches into so many different topics and phenomena. It is not surprising to me at all that would come up in this whole arrangement of yours.
Absolutely. Like I was going to mention, you mentioned it. It's in the occult, paranormal, and UFO lore. Like there have been cases where contactees have been aboard, potential ships, and they have seen writing, and then when they've written it down afterwards, people have looked at it and like, this is almost like Sumerian script, apparitions, angels, things like that have come down and conveyed writing. Like the idea of a Sumerian or Babylonian or Mesopotamian script is kind of like a root, pops up again and again and again, and it's fascinating. And
I think it's plausible. I have a photo that I keep, which I got from Pinterest, which has like all of the alien identities picture with the text, like the Watcher, the Gray, the Green, etc. I can send that to you later if you like.
Yeah, for sure.
I think is it a book? I think I might have it.
I think it's a picture that I have, but maybe it is a book. But these, I think it's plausible that the aliens, angels, they're all the same demons. They're all, in every religion, perhaps, is all the same thing, stemmed out to like, maybe everything is just one source. To every legend, there's like a truth. To every myth, there's a truth. Perhaps there's one source that just stemmed out. So to every religion and every cultural era, because Asia is really far from like, there's 17 crucified saviors, right? And a lot of them have the same story. Even in Egypt, Horus's mother was, her last part of her name was Mary. So, and she was a virgin. And so a lot of that is repeated again and again. And then there's scientific evidence of the flood. I think it's all possible that all these things are one thing. All these names are one thing, but that's just like a thing I entertain.
At the very least, there's a connection.
I think it's possible that our civilization has destroyed ourselves over and over and over again, to where someone had to step in, or a being, and say, enough of this, wipe us out, and reborn. Cement was forgotten. That was invented in Roman times, forgotten for how many years, and then remembered how to make it. So perhaps the 17 crucified saviors, we've destroyed ourselves 17 times. I don't know.
Are you familiar with Graham Hancock and his writings?
No.
You should probably look into him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hancock.
Graham Hancock. I'll send it to you after the show. Basically, everything you just said is what he's been writing about for the past 30 years.
I do here and there watch Ancient Aliens. I watch nothing but the Travel Channel, Discovery, and History. So, and a lot of the research and spiritual stuff, I feel is all on the same page. So even in witchcraft, and like if you would put that with like Buddhists, I feel like a lot of that, more of what I'm doing would be like the mental side of Buddhism, making things happen with their mind rather than incantations and waving a wand and focusing on putting the stuff through the object. Perhaps I just connected directly to the source to see or hear whatever people call that Akashic records or whatever.
Records, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which also is in the Bible as the book of life. So it actually speaks about the same type of thing that Edgar Cayce dreamt about, but from the Christian Bible, the book of life, the hall of life, to where everyone's name is revealed. And so that's about the same thing. A lot of people think it's a big computer that I've read. I think that's too humanistic.
The great Fortean writer John Keel would agree with your sentiments. He might call it the great phonograph in the sky that keeps it's on repeat over and over and over and projecting these messages that we interpret in different ways as the other, as some may call it. Yep. So, perhaps it is on us to decipher it and give it meaning and give it shape. Perhaps it's a communication. Perhaps it wouldn't be anything without us, and we wouldn't be anything without it.
Well, Kate, I want to thank you so much for coming on. This has been an absolute blast. One of the best episodes I think we've had so far.
Yeah, it's definitely been up there, and this is a lot of fun to do. So, would you ever be willing to come back
afterwards?
Oh, yeah.
And of course, I'd be willing to come back. Thank you. I'd love to.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, and we will be talking to you again.
All right, bye.
And that was our interview with Kate. We really, really enjoyed having her on the show and loved hearing all of her really incredible stories. Thank you all so much for being a part of the Strange Dominions journey. And we will see you again on the Strange Dominions.